being one of my all-time favorite third-party companies in the entire world, has brought me some of the best niche titles that I could ever get my hands on from Japan, pretty much. And I'm talking from the Shin Megami Tensei series, you know, the Persona games, just everything in between. The company is extremely badass, and if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have gotten a lot of random titles out there. The very first Guilty Gear, it got brought out thanks to Atlus. The very first Disgaea Our Darkness, we wouldn't have had that if it wasn't for Atlus. Everybody loves the Dark Souls games, but guess what? Demon Souls, who was that brought out by? Atlus. And there's a lot of other titles in between that they've brought out, translated, and published, and I absolutely fucking love the company for that. But when I got news recently that they're going bankrupt, I'm like, how? The company, as far as I knew, was doing quite well. I mean, they print in low quantities just because they know that they're going after a much smaller market, so they'll sell through those copies a lot easier. I'm like, how the fuck? That business model's been working for them for years. How is it now going belly up? Well, it turns out that it's not really Atlus who's actually going bankrupt. You see, Atlus is just one company under a much bigger company. So they're basically acting like as an umbrella. And this is Index Digital Media, who is pretty much like, you know, the head honcho there. They're the ones who are actually, going bankrupt at the moment. As a matter of fact, they're $250 million in debt right now. And that's not fucking chump change by any stretch of the imagination. Well, what happens in circumstances like this is, you know, if you catch it early enough, they have a lot of options. So, you know, they could still be a viable company even after bankruptcy. I mean, there's a lot of really famous people, a lot of big corporations, a lot of big companies, a lot of people in general have filed for bankruptcy and have been just fine. Well, what ends up happening in something like this is that they could trim the fat, they could liquidate, and they could sell off, and you know, various assets to go and make up the difference and try to get themselves back, you know, out of the red and into the black. With something like this, it seems like the most that's going to happen to Atlus is a potential buyout. So somebody could swoop in and buy out Atlus. Now, I started thinking about the potential behind this, and I really feel like that it could actually just help them in a lot of big ways. I mean, first, we think about third-party companies coming along. Square Enix being one of the biggest RPG companies out there. They could come along and they could buy out Atlus, and considering the fact that they are competition to one another, that would make a lot of sense. But at the same exact point, they're having a lot of trouble with their IDOS branch, and they're already in financial straits and in a bunch of fucking corporate restructuring, so I can't imagine that they'd want to go and take on somebody else's debt, let alone try to go and do more reorganization within their company, despite the fact that they would own all the intellectual properties, the franchises, and they would have a bigger publisher avenue than they would have previously. Then I thought about other companies like Namco Bandai. I'm like, oh, Namco Bandai, that would actually be pretty fucking cool. You know, if they came along. They don't put out a whole ton of RPGs, but they do put out the Tales series, and I love that to death, and it always makes me happy. You know, Rumbly and the Tumbly, it makes me just fucking giddy, because that series kicks a ton of ass. Well, I thought about them, like, that wouldn't be so bad. And who else has deep pockets? Well, not even just deep pockets, but I thought about another potential fit would be Xseed. Xseed is an extremely kick-ass company. They kind of remind me of the modern-day working designs, which is fantastic to me, or even Axis, which, you know, again, both of these companies aren't extremely huge, but you never know. Then I started thinking about, well, there was always Sega Sammy, they could go and do that, but then I started thinking outside of the box. I'm like, what if it wasn't a third party? What if they went first party? Can you imagine that? Imagine if a company like Nintendo, Microsoft, or Sony swooped in, picked them up, and made all their franchises and everything that they have first party. That would give said systems so much leverage within the gaming world. They would absorb so much, and to me that would kick a whole ton of ass, but at the same point that would make it, you know, a little bit harder for them to get their franchises out across the board, but that would give them the fucking cash flow that they need. Just imagine, you know, the fucking company who puts out the Shin Megami Tensei series having a ton of money to go and make their games instead of the limited budgets that they usually work with. Can you imagine that? Their games could be so much bigger and better and crazier. You never know. They could actually put out more stuff, get bigger teams, and just, there's a lot of stuff that they would have out there, and, you know, advertising would be a lot better for them. And I thought that would make a lot more sense for a Japanese company to do it, so Sony or Nintendo would make a lot more sense for it, though Microsoft would have a lot to gain by absorbing them, but to be honest, I wouldn't want that, because then it'd all be stuck on Xbox One. That would make me eternally sad face. So I wouldn't want to see some shit like that. But the idea of them being on Sony or PlayStation does make a lot of sense, considering that a wealth of the Atlus titles have showed up on both of those systems, like, unanimously. So I'm just like, oh, that would be kind of cool. So if Index Digital Media is going to end up selling off Atlus, which at this point in time, just looking at everything and their options, it's more than likely going to happen, but I don't think this is going to fuck up Atlus as a company. You know, all their titles are still coming out, you know, all their fucking business models are pretty much still out there. They're, you know, it's business as usual pretty much over at Atlus, and that makes me really happy. So you don't have to worry a whole bunch about them right now, and all the links in the description right now, there's a lot of legal jargon that, to be honest, I can't wrap my head around. So if anybody wants to be, you know, the fucking translator of sorts for everybody, by all means do that. Even if you want to make a video response saying all that stuff, you can. But pretty much it just boils down to, more than likely, this will be them selling off everything bit by bit or just as a whole. And I see them doing it as a whole because, well, it would make a ton more sense to do that. So anyway, I want to go and get that out there because a lot of people were bringing that up to me, and it got me worried because, again, I mean, this is a company that's brought me some of my all-time favorite games ever since the PlayStation 1 era, when I really got invested into the company and all the various games that they were bringing out. I mean, I've got a lot of Atlus titles, and anytime that they put something out, physical or digital, doesn't matter, I'm always paying attention. You know, console, handheld, what the fuck ever, just, Atlus kicks a ton of ass, and I just fucking love them to death. So, it's one of those things, I'm like, I don't want to see anything bad happen to the company, but from the looks of it, nothing bad will happen. As a matter of fact, this might end up working in their favor. Though I hope that they keep the name Atlus, no matter where they go to, just because, you know, that when I see that on a box somewhere, I get all excited and happy. I'm like, oh fuck yeah, that's really awesome. So anyway, if you have any opinions, thoughts, feelings on this entire things, you know, the news and shit like that, by all means, share your opinions and comments and all the other shit down below in the comment box, and video response, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, this is Alpha as always, nerds, nerdettes, and gamers, game the fuck on. There's a bunch of Atlus titles. Let's see, Soul Hackers, which is a game that came out on Sega Saturn that I won it back when I was still reading Electronic Gaming Monthly, the magazine. And I was like, oh man, I can't wait till it comes out here, and never did. 3D Dot Game Heroes, which is one of the very best exclusive PlayStation 3 games, and this is just fucking awesome. Take the very first Legend of Zelda, 8-bit and all, make it 3D, add a bunch of humor, there you go, you have that. Catherine, one of the most fucked up puzzle games that makes you want to lose your goddamn mind, and has a really cool ass story that's just very dark and fucked up and just crazy as shit. The very first Persona game, just, it's Persona. This is, I'll be honest, I played Persona 2 before I played Persona 1, and Persona 2 is still my all-time favorite out of the entire series, and it's like the only one that's not set in school, which I always found that to be kind of weird. Tail Concerto, I think it's Tail Concerto. Anyway, this is like Mega Man Legends in a lot of ways, so if you ever like that game, then you ought to be checking this out. It's a ton of fucking fun. The very first Guilty Gear, which I had mentioned before, it's very fucking awesome stuff. Very first Disgaea game, again, mentioned that. Disgaea, one of my all-time favorite tactical RPGs. The Shin Megami Tensei series, which is everything here, except for Devil Summoner 2 is up there. So Persona 3 FES, Persona 4, Devil Summoner, Digital Devil Saga 1 and 2, and Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. So that's a lot of shit right there. And Roller Rose, which is extremely overlooked and a really screwed up survival horror game. Just really fucking neat. And there's a ton of other titles out there. I just don't feel like fucking grabbing up everything and be like, and this and this and this and this and this and this, and put this way. Atlus kicks a ton of ass. Support all their fucking titles or check out their back catalog. Doesn't matter. They're awesome, and luckily it doesn't look like they'll be going away anytime soon. That's the way I like it. I like it. Atlus. Anyway, end of video.